Drive Safe Day. We have Amandeep preparing for lunch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch!
Hey,
that's what I. I
we're-
saw the women, ladies who launched, and I said, you know what? We got to get like a rocket on this thing here. We got
NASA.
a little NASA action going on. Producer, can we work on that? Let's get
Bezos,
NASA
doesn't
on
Bezos
this.
have his own? I mean, unless you got enough money, you can buy your own rocket ship, I guess.
Oh, but Drive Safe. Who do we have with us today?
We have Amandeep Beesla over there with Amandeep Beesla Consulting. Good morning, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you all doing?
Well,
We're doing well.
We're doing well.
Can I answer for you?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. He does anyway.
I'll answer for you. And we're doing well. One of us is doing way better than the other. But you know what? We're here with you though to learn a little bit about what it is, what goes on in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amandeep Beesla, health, safety, environment consultant with a background in trucking. So I'm actually third generation trucker. I've been in the trucking community all my life, ever since I was just a baby, actually. So yeah, trucking definitely has my heart for sure.
So when you say you're health, safety, and environment consultant, I'm just curious, kind of break us down exactly what that means.
Yeah, so I started off, so a bit about my background. My dad does have a trucking company here in Vancouver, BC, Canada. So for you Americans that may not necessarily know where Vancouver is, it's just above Seattle. And so I grew up in trucking all my life. I was helping my dad out when it came to anything that was related to safety. So dealing with the DOT CVSE, which is up here, so that they govern and regulate the roads and the roadways here in Canada. And so basically dealing with everything from like pre-trip inspections, making sure that the trucks are working fine, making sure that the operators are safe and healthy, looking at hazard assessments. So anything in that realm, safety procedures as well. And so growing up with that knowledge and kind of learning it as I went, I ended up in Alberta. So I was running heavy equipment out there. And then that's when I got into health and safety. So what I would do is I would look at safety management systems within organizations, help them with their safety procedures, practices, anything to do with risk and hazard assessments as well. Whatever the day-to-day operations were, making sure that everybody was abiding by the safety program or the safety manual that they had in place, and whether it was a specific construction site or different projects as well.
Amandeep, so I know you have that little checklist of what we go off, but we go off script here all the time.
Off
so
the rails.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of getting you ready for this. All right, so I hear you, and as somebody who who gets who consultants come and try to talk to, I hear it, and I hear one thing. I got to write a check out. How do you really prove out your measurement you're going to be successful? What's your key to make sure that that company that you're going to consult with gets value out of what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I always say produce, but produce safely. And so with health and safety, a lot of times companies look at, when it comes to safety, they look at it as an overhead or a cost center. And essentially, yeah, we are, unless you know otherwise, meaning that there are certain KPIs and certain deliverables, such as like incident rates. And in the safety world, we refer to it as TRIFs and RIFs, meaning that, hey, how many incidents are there? How many near misses? How many days did you work safely? How do we reduce that? Because we all know that if there's an incident that happens on site, there's so many other variables. So first off, you need to make sure that you're keeping your company healthy in the sense that you're looking after your workers, making sure that they're working in a safe environment. You've made it as safe as possible. Looking at equipment as well. So anytime there's an incident, something goes down, your worker gets injured, that's not good for production. From a safety standpoint as well, you need to make sure that everything's up to par and standards as well.
How many of the business calls that you get today are out of it's like, hey, it's too late, we got to have you come in now, as opposed to proactively bringing you in, and what's the different challenges in going and trying to fix somebody versus trying to make sure somebody has the right practices in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my calls that I get, so there's proactive, and then an incident happens, and then there's reactive. So a lot of the calls I get, unfortunately, they are a reaction to an incident happening or the regulators coming in and stopping production. And so what happens there is I assist them and I consult and I advise them on how to go about. I also try and educate my clients as well. Unfortunately, with the smaller companies, they just simply don't have the finances to back them up compared to the bigger companies. They don't have the support, they don't have the resources, they don't have very much in place in terms of systems as well. The bigger companies, when it comes to trucking, when it comes to construction, those are kind of the arenas that I play in, or the industries I'm a part of. They have that funding, they have that money to back it up, they have teams of safety. And so they have safety management systems, pretty robust, everything's in place. And so going back to the original question, yes, a lot of times people do call me, but it's more so reactive, or something's happened or on the brinks of happening. And when I say happening, I mean either an incident or a high potential near miss or something that's unfavorable.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost like a band-aid. You don't really need one till you actually need one, right? Until you put it, you don't, you keep them in the drawer somewhere, but you don't actually go get them until you actually have a cut. But I guess my question is, and I saw this and I wanted to ask, I didn't want to follow, I know Rick wants me to follow along the same lines, but in, in your job and in your experience, it says that you've worked with heavy machinery as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is. So
What?
I've been around dump trucks, so tandems and ponies and pups. And then when I was working in Alberta, I was running a lot of the equipment up there. So mostly trucks and dozers. And definitely like being in a system, being in a working for an outfit, and I've worked for both big and small. Looking at it from like my safety lens, you can change a piece of paper, that's fine, but to change a workplace culture, it takes time. Because what happens is you have individuals and you can have a system in place, you can have something called behavior based safety, but until you change the overall culture, if you're in dire straits or if you have an outfit where it's unsafe, everything comes from the top down, meaning that you need to have buy-in from leadership, from management, and again, just the way they look at things. And you can tell if somebody's got alternative motives, or if they're not, they're doing it for the right reasons. So a lot of times people are like, it's all about the money, we just need to produce and we need to keep going. And again, I always say produce, but produce safely. Make sure that you're taking care of your people, make sure that you're taking care of um, all your groups and workers, because in turn they'll take care of you.
You find that resistance to these ideas? Do you find it more so on the top, in the middle management, or on the bottom? Where do you find a lot of these changing ideas and values most resistant?
I would say it depends. It goes company to company and corporate culture to corporate culture. I've dealt with companies where they've had buy-in from the top, but then by the time it trickles down to the field level workers, those values are somehow missed, or they just haven't come down. And I've had the opposite, where there's been stellar teams out in the field, and they're working away, they're making sure that they're staying safe, even if there's not a system or a program in place. And a lot of times there may be a disconnect between leadership and management and the bottom line workers as well.
You got to
Um,
find that. You have to find that person with passion, right? I mean, you got to find those people with the passion and safety to really make a difference. It seems like it doesn't matter what level it is. From what it sounds like, you can be out in the field, middle management, or even upper management. You just got to find that individual that looks for it and desires it.
Absolutely. And I've also I've worked with construction companies out here in Vancouver residential, where they want to do the right thing, but they just don't know what that right thing is, meaning that they don't have very much education or knowledge. There's language barriers as well. And I experienced that firsthand. Even though I was born and raised in Canada, I never learned English till I was 6 years old because we predominantly spoke Punjabi at home. And even though we spoke Punjabi, my dad would still point out what was right, what was wrong. He would always tell me to buckle up. And like I have memories of when I was like 8, 9 years old, where he's making sure that I'm staying safe and I'm doing the right thing. And like he would teach me everything, and he'd be like, "Hey, whenever you operate your vehicle or drive your car, before you do, you have to do a circle check." And I never knew what that was until the light came on later on in my teens, and now I apply it in my everyday real life. But having again those values instilled from a young age, and another reason why I feel so passionate about giving back to my community is because I saw how my parents and my dad struggled as an immigrant, and I just don't want people to experience the same pain and the same struggles that my parents went through. So a lot of times I see these construction companies, and a lot of time they're mom and pop. They want to do the right thing. They just don't know what it is, or they don't know how to navigate through the regulations, through the law, and what that looks like as well. So I really do feel for them. I sympathize, and they may not necessarily have the support.
Do you do any consulting work on this side of in the United States?
I worked briefly in Washington State, so it was for an outfit that would move like structures such as buildings. But I would say that that was at a very high level, and it was health and safety. So my experience, it spans to predominantly the province of British Columbia, and as well as the province in Alberta. When I was in Alberta, I worked oil and gas industry. So I worked at open pit mines, SAGD sites, pipeline as well. I did a brief project in logging and forestry, so more so in Canada. I
Gotcha.
recently came out to Tradeswomen Build Nations in Vegas. That was a couple of weeks ago, and I got to socialize and connect with tradeswomen in the States and America as well. So that was a phenomenal experience.
And I asked that question, I guess, and so maybe it'll go back to your work in Washington, or even with some of the people you connect with in Vegas. What are some major differences, say in Vancouver and on this side, in the United States, in how that you look at safety?
Great question. I would say I'd probably classify it, I wouldn't say the same, but very similar. I've worked with Americans up in Fort McMurray, Alberta before, and their viewpoints, I've shared experiences and stories, and I've talked to a lot of them. I remember working with some iron workers from down south, and how they were talking about how we have better systems, safety systems in place, how we're pretty thorough. There's a lot of documentation. From my understanding, there's a lot of legalities around health and safety, especially with OSHA down in the States. I do join meetings with the ASSP, which is the American Society of Safety Professionals, and looking at certain things. Though safety, it comes down to the same, the fundamentals of building blocks are all very, very similar. I find that there may be a cultural difference. And when I say culture, I'm talking about workplace safety culture. I know there's a lot of punitive measures that are taken in the States. Whereas with speaking to British Columbia, we have the Workers' Compensation Board, also known as WorkSafe BC. They'll come out and they'll try and educate a lot of companies and work with them.
You find that, and as we talked a little bit about your personal experiences, how have you drawn from the differences that you had in your family going forward, and now going into the business world, and you've experienced a multitude of environments. It sounds to me. How have you taken from that and given to the other?
Yeah, growing up in trucking, so I come from, my background is my heritage or my ethnicity. I'm South Asian, East Indian. So growing up in that environment, growing up, my dad joined the Teamsters at a young age back in, I believe it was the 1970s, 1980s. So having all of that to where I'm at now, I definitely have a wide variety of experience, and it's definitely shaped and molded me. So having those cultures in place, trying to be informed and educated. Um, my dad dropped out of grade 10 and then he immigrated from India to Canada. And so along with him, he brought all his, both my parents brought their values, their beliefs, their traditions. So uh, living in two worlds, like having a foot in both, it definitely shaped me in terms of my profession, my career as well. And just educating myself and making sure I like stayed on top of it, and having like the schooling in place and speaking to people as well and being informed, broadening my experience, working for my dad's trucking company, like for the family, and then going out. So I started working temp jobs when I was probably about 16, 17, I would say. And just having that exposure overall as well.
Well, I do appreciate it. You're definitely an inspiration and a success story, to say the least, especially when it comes to safety. We want to thank you for coming out today. We're running out of time, but before you go, we always like to ask our guests to state their name, who they're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Can you do that?
Absolutely. My name is Amandeep Beesla. I'm a health, safety, and environment consultant with Amandeep Beesla Consulting Limited. I'm watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Be safe and make a difference today. I know you will, but I'm going to encourage you anyway. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thank you very much.